So I hope you guys found some good verses of scripture, wise, wisdom. Anybody have one that they you were to look up in your concordance and say, "Oh, here's something that I searched out and found." Anybody have one that pertaining to either wise or wisdom that you go, "Ooh, I liked this verse. This was a good one." Don't make me call on you. She's hunting for one, I can tell. She's like looking down her list. Which one do I want to use? Debbie?
This is one Jesus said.
Okay.
Matthew 7:24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built his house on the rock.
That's a great verse. And what's great about that one is it moves you right into what we all remember the story that surrounds that. And so he actually illustrates that verse. So it's a good one. Anytime you have a verse of scripture that you want to memorize, if it's something that you can build off of that gives you like things around it, it'll help your brain be able to memorize it more. All right, Carol, you got one? She does have a whole bunch.
In Christ are all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge.
That's great. That's a good one. All right, so I hope what you do after this study is over is you don't stop seeking wisdom. You don't go, well, I did a 6 weeks course, I figured it out, I've been instructed, now I'm on my own. I ask you also to read chapter 10 of Ecclesiastes, and I'm curious, how many of you all read that? All right, so look, when you read that book, you read that chapter, what kind of thought patterns are you either wrestling with or you have? Did you read it and go, oh, well, that was so clear and fed my soul and encouraged me? You know why I had you read that? It's because it seems disjointed. That is what the book of Ecclesiastes is sort of like. It's a hard book of wisdom literature because most of the time when you look at wisdom literature, you can do a outline of a book or you can do an outline of a chapter. When we do Ecclesiastes, what you find is it's almost impossible to outline it. You know, he has like his opening statement. You know, there's like in chapter 3 that beautiful poem that I think it's the birds wrote. To everything there is a season, you know, a time to reap and a time to sow and a time to weep and a time to mourn and all that. And then he goes into like these sayings that just seem like they're so disjointed. So when we come to Ecclesiastes, one of the challenges that we have when we study it is that it's so important that when we look at this, we are able to stand back and get a whole view of the book. So you know what the whole purpose of it, the whole premise of it, the perspective of it. Because if you're just taking bits and pieces out and you go, well, I'm going to take this verse. And so like you just look at chapter 10, it says, dead flies make the perfumers, chapter 10, verse 1, dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. And so we can sort of play around with that verse and we can understand what it means is that what happens, you have something that's so valuable, something that's so great and brings life and scent and pleasure to somebody, and then a fly lands in it. What happens to that ointment? It ruins the ointment. You get a dead rotten fly in ointment. You don't go, oh well, now I'm just going to keep using it because I've got that. This is what it says that folly does. You can live a whole life of wisdom and you get a little bit of folly in there. And haven't you seen that in somebody's life? You go, wow, they just are doing so great, and all of a sudden you see them make a really bad stinky decision, and it ruins a big thing, a big beautiful thing, part of their life. So Solomon's pulling these phrases out and using them and making very strong points. But now let's just do this. Let's start In chapter 1, I'm going to read a lot of passage this morning, but there's a good point behind it. So let's look at it. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanity. All is vanity. What does man gain by the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and it hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south, and it goes to the north, and around goes the wind, and on its circuit the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing which it is said, see, this is new? It is already, and it has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I have applied my heart to seek and search out by wisdom, all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I've seen everything that is under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this is also but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases in knowledge increases in sorrow. Then I want you to flip over to the end of the book, chapter 12. We're going to pick up, it's such a tiny book that it feels like you're just skipping right over pages. But all right, so chapter 12, verse 1. Remember also your Creator in the days of youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. And then what Solomon is going to do here, and I want you to pay attention to this, is I want you to start looking at the way that he starts talking about life in general. And we're going to look at, if we live to be old, in this little context of he's going to paint for us this picture of losing your strength and what the old age process basically looks like. And I don't understand it, but like if we live to be old, and I look back on my youth, what he said there just in that very first sentence there, remember also your Creator in the days of youth, before the evil days come and the years draw, of which you'll say, I have no pleasure in them. Basically, that's saying, in your youth, by the time you get to the end of your life, you will say, wow, I have regret. I don't understand anybody. I hear people interviewed all the time, and it'll be something either like a game show they do, or they're at the end of life, or they made some bad decisions, or whatever. And then somebody will put a mic in their face, and they'll go, all right, what just happened to you? So I see what you did there, and now this is how it turns out everything. Do you have any regrets? What do people typically say in that moment? No. What is the matter with them? Does that seem odd to you? Is there a day that you have lived that you get to the end of that day that you don't go, wow, I have a regret. This didn't happen. I wish this had happened. I wish I'd said this. I wish I didn't say that. Yeah, I'm always saying things I wish I didn't say. But I get to the end of it. So when Solomon gets here over in chapter 12, he's saying, man, there are going to be countless occasions in life that we have chosen the lesser thing. And we get to the end of it. And in this now, he's going to do this, give us this very graphic and but very real picture of the aging process. So as I say the phrase, you can sort of, some of them, I'll be honest with you, I went through and I tried to put in there the things that I thought he would be referring to. But it is something that happens to your body or your brain or whatever it is in the aging process. And let's say before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars, this verse 2, are darkened and the clouds return after the rain. Do you see how do you understand what he's doing there? It's like you're losing time in a sense. You lose the sense of time. It says like as we get older. Do you know what happens? Anybody else in this? It's like, wow, where did that week go? This really is true. It speeds up in your brain as you get older. I don't know why that happens. I have no brain chemistry to figure. I don't have the teaching or learning or whatever it is to understand and comprehend that. I just know, like, you have no sense of time as you get older. That changes with you, the value of a day. Verse 3, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble. I would say that's probably like the things that you use your hands for. You use your hands to keep your house, to do that. Your hands will tremble. And the strong men are bent. What would that be? Stooped over. Anybody else besides me, when you get up from a chair, if you're old now, all right, once you hit, I don't know, 50-ish or something, your body, what is it? 35. Carrie, you have just made my day. That you stand up and you don't go upright as easily as you once did. And it's funny, like Herschel and I will talk. I'll say, you walking like an old man, or he'll say, you walking like an old lady, because we don't pull all the way up. It feels natural to have that bend. It actually feels more comfortable on some level. And then it goes on, it says, and the grinders cease because they are few. Teeth. There you go. What's happening? You're losing teeth. I've lost teeth. That happens. You can take good care of them, and it still happens. And those who look through the windows are dim. Eyes. And the doors on the street are shut. I'll be honest. I saw a bunch of people say what it meant, and I never agreed with any of them. So I said, I don't know what that means. I don't know what Solomon's saying. I have to leave that out. When the sound of grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, what would that be? Sunrise. So what happens to old people, us as we age? What? They don't sleep as much, and any little sound. It says the sound of a bird will wake you up. And all the daughters of song are brought low. Hearing. Perfect. They are afraid also of what is high and the terrors that are in the way. What else happens as we age? We get fearful. We will visit. I put elderly, like 85 and up. Okay, we'll visit people who are like 85 and up. And one of their great fears is falling. They're afraid that they will fall. They think about it all the time. They walk like they're going to fall. Solomon is understanding this. The almond tree blossoms. All right, so what is that one? Our hair. The grasshopper drags itself along. I like that. What is that? All right, I think it's the gait, your gait. Watch just little kids walk. Little kids, I love little kids. Little kids sort of bounce wherever they go. They do this walk thing. I don't see adults do that, really. Yeah. Your get up is gone. That's it. Instead of a grasshopper. But there we go. Yeah. Yeah. Do what? Shuffle. You do. You don't lift your feet up. It's funny. I'll tell Herschel's mom when she's with me. She stumbles a bunch, and one of the things is because she doesn't lift her feet up. And she wears high heel shoes that she falls in. And then it says, just like her daughter-in-law, and desire fails. What would that be? What kind of desire do you think he's referring to? Think about this one. Sexual desire. This one's desire. Sexual desire and the power, the sexual power desires, because man is going to his eternal home and the mourners go about the street. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. So, you all, if we don't, that's why I wanted to take these. I wanted you to read chapter 10. I wanted to get 1 and 12 so that we can bookend it, because if you don't see the big picture of what the writer of Ecclesiastes is doing, then you would form an opinion that this is really a depressing book, much like you would of Job, right? A book that's discouraging, but both are quite the contrary, because when you move to the perspective of the valuable insights and wisdom that both of these books hold for people in their Christian walk, is it good to know that and be reminded that suffering is there? And to see somebody suffer and to see somebody suffer well when we study Job. Was there value in that book of Job? Was there? Absolutely. Well, Solomon is going to be producing this same thing, because when we start off this study, the very beginning week, one of the encouragements that we did was be careful how you walk. Remember that? We started back walking as one who is wise and not unwise. Ecclesiastes is the great follow-up to that says, basically it's telling us how and why we walk matters. The book of Ecclesiastes is helping us face the issues of finding meaning in life when everything seems to be meaningless and to be futile. It's not a pessimistic view of life, but it is a book of reality. It's saying, you know what? Do we all know aging is there? We all know that this is where it's gone. So the writer is going to focus us in this way. It says, all right, if all you look at in life is what happens in life, the rhythms of life, the cycles of life, and you think all that is to life is what I see before me, you have a very, very limited perspective of what God is doing. And you have a very limited desire to do anything with it. So if we allow the things, both good and bad, to be observed without purposeful and a good wise God behind them, then what we do is we just live a life that's empty and full of meaning. If you see everything that happens in your day, God is behind it all. Does that change your perspective of how you live? Does it, if you can get a youth to understand, look, there is a big picture of what God is doing in your life. Don't make mistakes and don't look so short-sighted at it. Ecclesiastes is like my lesson, this whole book. It has no outline, really. It's just a bunch of realities and truths that Solomon is going to do. And the author of Ecclesiastes, we know, is none other than the wisest of the wise, Solomon. And how do we know that? Because he doesn't come out and say, I, Solomon, pen these words. We can deduce this from several key statements. Look at verse 1 of chapter 1. And it says, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Well, we know David had several sons, right? But we know Solomon was one of those sons. And it says, I, the preacher, have been king, in this verse 12, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. And we know that Solomon was the king. He's saying, I was the king. Any other sons of David were the king? No, it would be Solomon. And then verses 13 through 14, he was a wisdom seeker, and he has seen it all. Chapter 12, verse 9 also just talks about how he was wise and everything. And we know the testimony based on this book and a couple of other places that I'll give you, that we can deduce with good confidence that Solomon is the most likely candidate for this. And why that matters is because we know some things about Solomon. Solomon's father was David, and we know, what do we know about David? Let's just think about David. That is one of the most important phrases. He was a man after God's own heart. So Solomon was able to witness a father who loved the Lord Jesus, that loved God, that wanted to serve God. He followed God. He loved him greatly. But what else do we know about David? on this end, we know, man, he does high highs of loving God. What else do we know about him? He does low lows. So he sees what a man who walks with God looks like, and he sees a man who, when he doesn't walk with God, looks like, and the tragic consequences of it. So he sees how life plays out in people who love God. They can make very, very bad choices. Also, think about this: having been exposed to David, he is the son of a what? A king. So he's living in the palace as a son of a king. So he is exposed to life that most people would not be exposed to. He's exposed to people coming from kings from other territories, from other areas. He's exposed to opulence. He had access to more things in the world than anybody else probably of his time, because of being in that palace. He also would come into contact with people from other cultures. So he's just not seeing the culture that he lives in. He's seeing people who bring another culture over into him and what they're like. Have you ever watched, I love watching any of like history shows or documentaries of people who live in other cultures, and how they've embraced a whole culture and why people do things. And it's fascinating to me. Solomon got to see, well, here's what these people live like who live in this part of the world. Here's what it is. Most people would not have that. Again, we know he's exposed to opulence as a king when he probably became king somewhere around when he was 20 years old. And he got to interact with people like Queen of Sheba, which is a big deal. So she's coming from Africa. And listen what it says in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1. Now when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, the attendance of his servants, their clothing, his cupbearers, and his burnt offerings that he offered at the house of the Lord, there was no breath in her. Do you understand how much this is the Queen of Sheba, who when she sees King Solomon, she goes, this dude has it all. He's not missing anything. It takes her breath, and it says, and she said to the king, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom. But I didn't believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Your wisdom and prosperity surpassed the report that I'd even heard. And then down to verse 10. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold and a very great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again came such an abundance of spices as these that the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So we get to see, is there anything that Solomon, probably on this earth at the time that he was living, that he didn't know of, possess, understand, have access to? All of it. He sees this incredible wealth, all that's before him. But then he's also acquainted with lower life status, because as the king, was one of my favorite stories over in 1 Kings chapter 3, starts in verse 16. It shows how he is approached by these two young prostitutes who both have had a son. And one of the sons dies, and in the night, the other prostitute takes the son that is living and switches out her dead child for it. And then Solomon has to make a ruling over who this baby belongs to. So he's seen what poverty does to people. He's seen what the life of prostitution does to people. He's seen what the Queen of Sheba does to people. Then put on top of that, it uses the phrase, he clung to and loved wives. Do you remember how many wives he had? 700 wives. And then he's got concubines with that. So he's got 700 women. Can you even imagine? And where did they come from? Foreign cultures. So that was his his great weakness, his absence of wisdom, his downfall. He was told, do not marry with people of another culture. Don't do that. Well, guess what he did? He did it. But do you see what I'm wanting us to understand is, man, he knows what at least 700 other culture episodes would be like. He sees what they look like, what they are like. He has a perspective that of probably any human you could imagine, pre-internet could have. It's just incredibly broad. So when we look into the Bible and we're looking for wisdom, we know wisdom is contained from Genesis to Revelation. But when we look at the book of Ecclesiastes and we're looking for wisdom, this would be the one person in all of Scripture that you would go, he has seen it all. And so he's got a perspective of what is real and what is not. And he opens up this book with a discussion of the reality of just living in a false world. And so he's going to use this phrase, the word of the preacher. And what this word, the preacher, means, it doesn't mean like our preacher, though it does fit our preacher. The best way to explain that would be one who speaks with influence. They speak in an assembly. They gather people and they say, here are wise words. But they don't just throw out knowledge. What they do, what the preacher's role was, anytime you look at how that would be defined out in that era, it would be somebody who has the ability to persuade people into an action, to do something with that information, to compel people to it. So let's talk about two other phrases. So now that we know, okay, so Solomon, it says the preacher, is about to say these words and speak these words, not just to give us information and go, well, here's how life starts, life is meaningless, and then it ends, and it's over, blah, blah, blah. That's not what he's doing. He's wanting to compel us to do something with that information. And then he gives us these phrases, under the sun. What do you believe that under the sun means? Basically everything. Everything where? On this earth. Everything that you see, everything in this world, everything that you open your eyes to would be under the sun. And if he's wanting us to understand this big deal of this, because if all we have is what takes place in this tiny moment on this physical world, then he moves to this phrase. It's what? Vanity of vanities. All right, so let's talk about this word. First of all, anytime you see something that is repeated phrase, it's going to carry with it a very significant weight. It's a style of Hebrew writing that they would use, like example, Holy of Holies. Do you understand? What is Holy of Holies? It means the holiest of holy places, right? He's going into the Holy of Holies. The Song of Songs. At the beginning, I said, we're going to cover wisdom literature, and I said, but I probably will not get over into the Song of Solomon and do it. Well, here, I did it. I'm there. Song of Songs. I've mentioned Song of Solomon. This is when you read this, it's Solomon. We know he wrote 1,000. The Bible records he wrote 1,005 songs. And it says he wrote very many sayings as well. And he's saying about the Song of Solomon's, this is the Song of Songs that I've written. This is the number one, I use the phrase number one hit of all of them. And this phrase, Vanity of Vanities, we see it shows up somewhere close to about 48 times, some form of it. And what it means is it brings, like we look at, when we talk about the word vain, what do we typically mean by it? She's so vain. Conceited. This is not what this word is. It carries with it futility or emptiness. It's like empty of empties. Futility of futilities. It's like the wind. And he sort of even described that in chapter 1 when we read it. It comes and it goes. Think of yourself like it's like a breath on a cold winter's day. You walk outside and you go, and you see it, and that goes away. This is what Solomon is wanting us to see the perspective of, is your life, my life. It's like a vapor, And he's going to describe basically for us. And he's saying, all right, here's the deal. Life, everything under the sun, everything that you see is like a breath. It's meaningless. It's empty. But what he's not saying, this is what it's like for everybody. What he's saying is, this is what it's like if you don't understand there is a God out there, that there is a God behind it. If you don't see life, if you see life apart from God and apart from eternity, do you understand how mundane life can be? Anybody here go to bed tonight and know you're going to wake up tomorrow and do the same things that you did today? You're going to wash dishes again, right? And you're going to put them away, and then what's going to happen tomorrow? You're going to wash dishes, and you're going to put them away, and then what's going to happen the next day? You're going to wash dishes, you're going to put them away. You're going to vacuum the floor to do that. If you live your life not able to just stand back and go, there's a purpose and a method, even in the monotony of life. There's meaning to all those things. The things that, and so Solomon is going, he's going to go, you all look, this is real life. Your life will be monotonous. It will feel empty. It will feel like you do something and it just does it back. You know, the sun's going to rise and set. And the next day the sun's going to rise and it's going to set. And if you don't understand and put weight behind the way you walk in these days, that there's a purpose that God is doing for it. He's trying to compel us to live wisely within the reality of the sameness and vanity of life. He's not saying, wow, life doesn't mean anything. He's saying, make it mean something. Make it have the value that it, see the value that's behind it. You know, most of our life, we work really, really hard to escape reality, don't we? You know, like we can change our scenery and we can try and escape from the daily of life, but isn't that temporary? You go on vacation, what happens? You got to come home. We got to come back from Disney. You know, I see all these people post their pictures on Disney and it's just the sweetest life. And then guess what? You come home and you have to take those ears off. Or it's just weird. You know, that's the cycle of life. You know, we have anti-aging creams and therapies, but what happens? You still age. Those things are going to happen. So what the wisdom of this book provides is not to teach us the futility of life, but the futility of thinking of life apart from living it for God. That all those things are going to happen in our lives. I will age, I will vacation, and I will come home. And here Solomon has all this wisdom there. And he's saying, look at all this futility of life. This is what happens. And then he gets in chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. And I think it's his epiphany moment in his book. And it says, so I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. So he enjoyed his work. And that was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained, and here's our phrase, under the sun. I did all that I thought I could do. I lived really hard. I got all the gusto out of life, and what ends up happening is that incredible Rolling Stones song that gives improper grammar, it's a double negative, so it actually works, is I can't get no satisfaction. That's what Solomon is saying. You know, man, if it's just about this, if it's just about this world, then it's meaningless. When God is out of our plans or even our small decisions in life, even the best of things cannot fulfill us, and they ultimately become meaningless. You just go, wow, I did that, and it's done. Isn't it crazy, the things that we crave, we want, and we say, oh, that's going to give me pleasure. And then you get it, and then what happens? How long does your pleasure last, typically? Anybody have something that just you longed for, you wanted to buy so desperately, and you finally get it, and you're just like, you got that pleasure, and then you go, dang, that just wasn't as much pleasure as I thought I was going to get out of it. You know that feeling? of getting something, you lose a new car smell, all those things. Life just happens. By the end of this book now, Solomon comes back and he's going to give us these observations of life. And we'll pick up in chapter 11. And what he's doing, he's giving us here this honest, again, unfiltered perspective on life. And he's not going to try and paint for us a rosy picture to just go, oh, well, just suck it up, buttercup, hang in there, make the best of life that you can. What he's wanting to do is give us a reality check. Remember, this is the wisdom of Solomon. This is him trying to say, if you're just thinking so tiny in your perspective of this world is it, then I want you to see this world, if this world is it, you're missing out. You're not getting it all. He's giving us a reality check that says, all right, you better get life and purpose behind why you're doing. And you better do it. Verse 7 of chapter 11. Life is sweet and it is pleasant for the eyes to see sun. Solomon uses metaphors all through this book, and this is a wonderful metaphor that he uses speaking of life. Visualize this. You open up your eyes, you walk out the door, and you look, and you see the sun rising in the morning, whether it's out on the beach and it's rising up over the ocean, or you're looking out the mountains. How many of you are mountain people? How many of you are beach people? How many of you are all of those? Same. Me too. He's wanting to say, when that morning light, picture this feeling, when that morning light hits your face, and like we rise, we get up early for no other reason sometimes. Jenny, I saw on her trip to go visit Kim, my niece, they rose up early because what? See, at the dawn of a new day. There's something about it that just so fills your heart with hope. And then what happens with that day? we go on and we see him saying, okay, that light hits your face. This is the day. Verse 8. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many, and all that comes is vanity. Basically, he's saying, okay, you've got to learn to rejoice when you feel the sun on your face. But remember that these good times when you experience them, because there's bad times also. This is the cycle of life. I love it when somebody he's not Debbie Downer. He's dude realistic. I mean, he's saying this is life. This is what it's like. So, learn to accept that this is the cycle of life. Life is indeed this incredible gift. Don't devalue life. The world devalues life. It's like they make it less than it's intended to be meant to live. And what Solomon is saying, no, make sure that you love life, but also be very aware that it's not going to come without hardships. There's no good life that won't have sorrow and pain in it. Because if this is the perspective of the one man that we know that is healthy, wealthy, and wise, he could buy happiness anywhere, right? He could afford to change any situation. He was king. He could make rulings that say, everyone shall make me happy today. Everyone shall do nothing other than serve me today. I have the money to do whatever I want. I want the wealth to do whatever I want. And Solomon goes, look, I've seen it all. I've had it all. And it ain't all. It's not, if that's what you live for. So then we see Solomon, what he does is he takes this, remember, he's a preacher. He's trying to compel us to do something. And he wants to take and make a teachable moment. And he gives us these three things. He says, rejoice. I love that the Bible alliterated it for me. I didn't have to. Rejoice, remove, and remember. And he says in verse 9, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you on in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Basically, he's encouraging the youth. He's saying, oh, youth, find the enjoyments that the Father has given humanity. You all, Christians should enjoy life more than anybody else in the world because we know the giver of life. And he's given us all these good things. But he's also saying, all right, Solomon's saying, all right, but make sure you comprehend that your actions fit within the boundaries that God has given. Because remember in the Garden of Eden, what happened? God's saying, oh man, here's the great life. have all this, have everything that you want in this, enjoy it, let it satisfy you. But here's a boundary line. Don't do that. Don't partake of that one thing, because it will bring darkness into your life. And this is Solomon saying it after the fall has taken place. He goes, oh yeah, enjoy things in life. Enjoy the smells. Every Christian should be a foodie. You should enjoy the flavors. Just think about, I was talking about this with Herschel yesterday, and I love food, y'all. I just love it. I love savoring everything about it. And made this statement. I said, babe, think about this. The Lord did not have to give us taste buds. And he goes, well, that's out of nowhere. I said, no, seriously. He could have just had our tongue be apparatus that would accept a flavorless thing and give us fuel. But he gave us taste buds that take savory and sweet and hot and spicy and all. Is that not a gift of the Lord that you have it? How about smells? That you can, the fact that you can have good smells that do it. You all have never become more keenly aware of the gift of smells in my life, just what that's like. But not only is it a good gift, it's also a great warning. Bad smells. You need to be warned off by bad smells. I don't know if I said this last week, but I went outside to collect the garbage. So I tell you about the skunk thing. So I go outside and I'm rolling my garbage cans to the curb, and I go turn around and walk, and there is a skunk right there beside me, and his tail straight up in the air. So you don't go like you see in cartoons. It's like, and you see. I'm pretty sure that's not what skunks. I'm sure it just like comes out and it's just all over you. Well, I have zero smell. I can smell nothing. So I start walking back to the house, and I pick it up, and I start to open up the door, and then I realize, oh no, if I got sprayed, then I don't know it, and I'm bringing it into the house, and do I want to do that? So I ring the doorbell, and Herschel comes down, and I go, am I stinky? You smell anything? He's like, you are crazy. It's like, yeah, I just think there was a skunk out there and his tail was up. And if his tail's up, they mean he's sprayed. And so I'm just making sure I'm not bringing it. He's like, no, you don't. You understand the gifts that the Lord, all of creation, the Lord says, I'm creating this not for my pleasure. He created us for his pleasure. And he created for us, him to watch us enjoy these pleasures that he's given us out there. And so Solomon's going, make sure you understand that. But oh my goodness, make sure that there are consequences when you choose to accept something outside of all those pleasures. Isn't it crazy? We got all these great things, and then we choose bad things sometimes. That's what youth does. I told our sons repeatedly growing up, I says, you can control your decisions. You can control your decisions, but you cannot control the consequences of your decisions once you make them. So you just know if you choose to do that, you have to live with the consequences. So Solomon's going, rejoice. And then in verse 10 he says, remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Solomon's reminding us that life's so daily, and things are going to give you woes in your life and wearies in your life. And you cannot dwell on the woes and the wearies. You've got to learn to put them outside of your life and heart. Man, so many things I look at in my life, I go, dumb choice. That was a dumb choice. And still, like, it will just wear on me. You know what? What Solomon's saying is don't do that. Learn from that lesson. But don't let that defeat you, wear on you, put those away, learn to do it. Isn't that what the writer of Psalm 118 so clearly puts us into perspective of? And he says, oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. For his steadfast love endures forever. And then he drops on us in verse 24. This is the phrase. This is the day that the Lord has made. There is never a day you will not be able to say that. Because isn't that what the Bible said? This is the day that the Lord has made. Then remember the value of that day. Remove any woes that are over your heart. Turn them over to the Lord. Any vexations of them. Don't live in those woes. Don't think about, oh man, my life's so hard. You're missing life if you focus on those woes. So rejoice first, remove, and then remember. And this is the passage that I've read to us at the beginning, because there is a very vivid metaphorical picture of the process of aging. Just remember, aging's coming. And there will be a day where Herschel and I have made an observation that you get, you have all this big world and all this, and you roam throughout that, and then one day you get confined to one room, one space. Most people, like even if you live in a big house, you end up in one room in one space. And that becomes your, he says, one day you and I are going to look down. I'm going to look down at my legs one day, and I'm going to go, and I've already done this, and I go, those are my mother's legs. What happened to, like, your knees do weird things. I was like, gosh, I have my mother's legs. And one day I picked up my fork, and I looked, and I go, oh, that's my grandmother's hand. And all this, that's going to happen in life. And he says, so, life, aging, death, they are inescapable. Life is but a breath. You all, the death rate of Frankfort, Kentucky is 100%. And that is coming. And so Solomon, in the middle of this, he gives us this beautiful, hope-filled but sobering reminder before he gives us this conclusion of this book. And he says, and the dust returns to the earth as it was. So where did we come from in Genesis? Dust. Creates Adam out of the dust, and then out of Adam he creates Eve. And it says, and the spirit returns to God who made it. Do you see what that is? So your body's going to go back to dust, but your soul that God created goes back to him. And then we know, based on other passages, that absent with the body, present with the Lord, and then you appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Now, Solomon's not going to get into all the theological afterlife things. What he's wanting us to do is just go, wow, make sober judgments, because there is a creator who is behind you, the created. He's got a purpose for your life, things that want to do, and your life is given to you. God gave you breath, created you from dust, gave you soul, so that, and then he says soul goes back to him, so that we give our life back to him. So while we're here on this earth, if you're living simply under the sun, S-U-N, and not under the light of the sun, S-O-N, then your life's just going to come up empty. You're going to get to the end of it, and he's going to say it's going to be vanity of vanities. He doesn't get a different conclusion by the time he gets to the book. Like sometimes you'll read something, and they go, oh, like in Job we study, and Job has all this movement toward finally going, oh, but God, you're God, I'm not. Solomon's wisdom at the very first part of this book is the same wisdom that he ends with, that if you just live life for what you got in front of you, it's going to be meaningless. You've got to do bigger pictures of it. Remember when we talked at the very beginning, and we talked about that phrase in Ephesians that Paul gave us about walking not as unwise but wise, making the best use of our time because the days are evil. And then we began to search out this path for wisdom. And within this phrase, as we came upon that, within this search, we came upon this phrase, the fear of the Lord is what? The beginning of wisdom. Now let's read what the wisest of the wise says in his epilogue, in his conclusion. Look at verse 9 of chapter 12. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote about truth. And he said, the words of the wise are like goads. Do you know what a goad is? It's a prod, think of a cattle prod. Well, a goad is this long pointy stick that when oxen would be plowing a field, if they went the wrong direction, they would goad them on the side. If they stopped progressing forward, they would goad them in the back. And he's saying, listen, the Bible, the words that you're reading are like goads. They're intended to motivate you. They're intended to, when you start going off on the wrong direction and choosing to go your own way, they goad you back in. And when you settle in and go, here's where I am, I've grown as far as I can go, or I'm tired, I don't want to learn anymore. The word goads you into keep going forward. And then it says, and like nails fixed firmly are the collective sayings. What did nails do? What do they do? They hold things together. They fasten things together. Remember we talked about the word stabilizers at the beginning in one of the sessions? So the word of the wise is like motivation. They're like goads, and then they're also stabilization. They're, are we prone to shift and wonder? I love that beautiful hymn, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Do you know the rest of that verse? Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. I'm pretty sure that the writer of that song had to be thinking of this verse here. Because he knows, we want to wander off, and we need something that fastens us to what is real and what is true. You and I cannot fasten ourselves to either our feelings or our culture. If you fasten yourself to your feelings, what happens? What? You're a hot mess. That's excellent. Because what do your feelings do? Change. They are so fickle. It is unbelievable how fluid our feelings are. Psalm 1:11 says, here's what we have to fasten ourselves to, because if you're fastening it to culture, because culture's going to change, that's not going to be good. You can't fasten it to you and your thoughts and your feelings. So the only thing we can fasten ourselves to and use as a goad is the word of God. Verse 7 of chapter 111, the works of his hands are faithful and just. All his precepts are trustworthy. They are established how long? Forever and ever. To be performed with faithfulness and uprightness. The fear, and this is great, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and all those who practice it have a good understanding, and his praises endure forever. So in verse 11 there, who does it say that these words are from? Solomon just wrote this whole book now, and it seems really bizarre, and it seems disjointed and everything, and he's saying, okay, but these words are like goads, you all. And these words are like nails fixing it, because these words come from who? The one good shepherd. Who would that be? God. He's saying these words are from God, you all. This is, and it's beautiful, because the wisdom from above is what produced this wisdom in Solomon. He's saying this came from who God is, not from what I see. This is from him. And he goes on to give these incredible conclusions. It says, my son, beware of anything beyond these. Anything that gets added to what the word is, anything that goes, this is a self-help book, these are words of the wise, whatever it is, he says, because of making many books there is no end, and of much study is a weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter is all has been heard. You and I don't have enough time, energy, strength, whatever it is, to gain the wisdom we need. We can't read every book out there and be able to get wisdom from all those books. You know why? Because those books all contradict each other. Can you read one book on parenting one day and read another book on parenting that says exactly the opposite thing from the professional authorities who are all wise? Can you talk about marriage that way? Can you talk about how you walk and live in happiness and all that? There's no end to the wisdom that's out there in our culture. And so what Solomon's saying, all those books are going to come up empty. All of it, ultimately, you may find some truth things, but bottom line is only the words that come from the one shepherd is what you're going to do. Godly wisdom did not lead Solomon to know how wise he was. It led him to know how foolish he was. And that's what godly wisdom does. It makes us understand that apart from God, there is nothing. And he pulls us down, godly wisdom, and he says, and here's the bottom line where it falls to. Verse 14, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And remember when we defined the fear of the Lord at the beginning, and we said, what is it? And I want you all to answer this back. What is it? What is it? It's making sure you understand God is out there and with you and in you in all days and all ways. A continual awareness of Him. Say, Lord, I know you're here. Do you think that helps us from doing things? It fastens us, it goads us. How about a loving, all-filled reverence to God? If you just love somebody so much and you just want to love them well, doesn't it goad and fasten you to what you need to do and keep you from doing things you ought not do? And then we follow up with a sincere committed obedience to God. If He says do this and don't do this, you just go, I'm going to do that and I'm not going to do that. When I want to just spout off and say what seems to me or what feels good to me at that point, I'm going to choose not to do that. So let's just think about, I went through Solomon's, tried to go through the whole book, but then I just thought, I'll just sort of keep it more concise to this area. So what's some godly wisdom that you can apply in this passage of Scripture? First of all, enjoy life no matter which side of age you're on. I'm 60 years old. I don't have 60 more years to go. I'm sure about it. If I live to 100 years old, 39 years is what I got. I want to do 39 years well, whatever that looks like. I don't get to decide at 100 how I'm going to spend those 39 years. I get to decide today how I'm going to spend those 39 years. Whatever season of life you're in, don't miss opportunities that God puts before you. Whatever it is to do. Each stage of life is going to offer different opportunities. When I had children, I had certain opportunities. Marcia and I now, as grandparents, we get grandparent opportunities. It's awesome. I get to be an amazing grandmother. I want my grandchildren to go, like one day when they think back and they go, and I'm dead, I'm in the dust, and they go, well, tell me about your grandmother. I want them so desperately to say, man, she loved the Lord like nobody's business. She loved the Lord. She loved people. She enjoyed life. She made the best use of her time. I don't get to decide to do that later. I have to decide to do that and be that now so that I'm putting that in the ground. Also, don't pine away for what's past and miss out on what's now. You just enjoy what's now. You ever order something off a menu and you don't get what you want? And you look at it and you looked at somebody else's dish and then you go, oh man, they got that and that looks better than what I got. And then you sit there and you go, oh bummer, I should have done. You got food before you. We're that way. We easily take something and then we get, it's like, oh, don't pine away for what you don't have. Learn to do it. Take the opportunity to reset and refocus your purposes. Remind yourself, God's behind this. God's behind all of these things. Embrace the days that are sweet. Don't waste joys of life. Next, make kingdom use of what you've been given. You've got a lot of things that are going to burn up, right? As we're going up, things are burning off of us. And I can imagine, I sort of visualize like this. I've got like armloads of stuff. I'm taking it up to heaven. I'm taking it up to Jesus. And I'm going, man, I can barely carry all this. And then by the time I get up there, I got 2 little bags because everything else burned off. Everything else I go, I thought that might have been valuable, but I knew better. I knew that it wasn't. And we know those things. Recognize the joys and the graces in your life, in the good times and the bad. I will tell you all, I can be annoying at times with this trait. And I used to think I need to quit doing that. But after studying this, I'm like, no, I think that's okay to do it. An example of it, Herschel and I we were in Detroit. We were spending the night in the airport due to weather and flight cancellations. And we've had to lower our expectations in flying. Everybody does. And Herschel just made this statement, and some guy was like, grumble, 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 all these people, and they just keep, everything's going, cancel, cancel, cancel. And Herschel just said to the guy beside me, he said, well, I've just decided, just get me there safely and I won't complain. And the guy was like, oh, grumble, grumble, grumble. And I go into this mode, and the guy on the other side of me is going, I can't believe this. This stinks. My flight's been delayed. And I go, yeah, but they gave us like Biscoff cookies and chips. And, he didn't appreciate it. Like I appreciated it, and he didn't appreciate it, me saying it. But that I think that is a trait of a Christian person, is to look at the things that are gifts of grace in life. And I think Solomon is saying, don't miss out on those good graces, even in the bad. Celebrate those little snippets of joy and grace. The times that people do something that the Lord is clearly in that grace bringing for you. I will never forget the past. I was at the hospital, Georgetown Hospital, with my mom, and she lived. She fought dying for 3 days. It was really very, very challenging, very, very hard. And my sister Gloria and I were there, and I was just exhausted by the third day. And you all know the story of Herschel's in West Kentucky because of his dad's funeral. And so, I was just brain dead. I was just really, really tired. And finally, my mom takes her last breath. And as I'm walking out of the hospital room, in comes two ladies from Buck Run, and both of them did not know that the other one was coming, and they brought tall iced coffees from McDonald's, those like giant things, two of them, one for me, one for Gloria. They didn't know Gloria was there, and didn't, neither one of them knew it. So they was like, hey, oh, well, I brought Tanya ice cream. Well, my sister Gloria's here. This actually works out perfect. It was a moment, where I said last week when I talked about after the passing of my mom, and I walked out on those front steps, and the Lord had an insignificant person pass in front of my house and stop and just offer a kind word. It's those things where you just go, Lord, you just showed up. You know, He sees, He's all aware. Solomon's words to us are the wisest words in the world. And that is basically, it's not that the message of Ecclesiastes is nothing matters in life, it's that everything matters in life. Everything. That ultimately what gives our life meaningfulness and not meaninglessness is that God is behind all those things. Proverbs 31:30 says this, ladies, charm is deceitful, it's misleading. And beauty is vain. It doesn't last, it's fleeting. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Let's pray. Father, may you help us fear you. May you help us to hold this before our hearts. Lord, thank you for Solomon's words of wisdom. And Lord, he did see it all and had it all. And it didn't satisfy him. And he came fully face on recognition of God. You are a good God, and you're behind it all, and life is meaningless unless I understand that. And so, Lord, help us to live like we know you are there and you are here. And may you help us communicate wisdom through the way we live in our fear of you. And it's in your Son, Christ's name, we pray. Amen.